So finally watch this video, AJ The Untold Truth. You can now watch it on the Sky Sports YouTube channel, or Sky Sports Boxing YouTube channel. If you haven't already caught it on Sky On Demand or on the Sky Sports television. So yeah, people are making a lot of the fact that AJ said that Ruiz caught him with a lucky punch. And they're saying, well, this shows that AJ hasn't learned anything from the first fight and he's going to go into the rematch and make the exact same mistakes and lose again. And it shows he's not in the right frame of mind, etc., etc., etc. The fact that he's coming out so aggressive and clapping at Lennox Lewis and, you know, saying that he could beat Ruiz 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, whatever it was, again, shows he's not in a good frame of mind. He's also been clapping at Tyson Fury. Well, as far as him clapping back at people, I think is a good sign. Because I think one of the things which went wrong for AJ going into the first Ruiz fight is that he'd lost the eye of the tiger. He'd become, you know, too much of a corporate, all smiles, kissing babies, kind of, you know, nice guy. And in boxing, you have to be mean, you know? AJ early on in his career, he was mean. Maybe not outside the ring, but certainly inside the ring, you saw the arrogance, sticking his tongue out, goading his opponents when he was knocking them out. Sometimes even when he was fighting journeymen, you'd see that arrogance from him. I think he needs that. I think he actually lost that. He started becoming a bit of a, you know, nice guy like Klitschko. I'm talking about Vladimir here. And one of the things which was a weakness of Vladimir is whenever somebody came in there with an attitude and was able to rough him up, it got Vladimir out of his comfort zone. You know, Vladimir, for most of his career, wasn't a guy who liked to fight. He was a guy who liked to box and be in control. But if you dragged him into a fight, he usually fell out of his depth until very, very late on in his career when he learned how to handle himself in a fight. But for most of his career, he didn't like it. AJ becoming a little bit too much like that, in my view, going into the Ruiz fight. Needs to get back to the old AJ who fought Dillian Whyte. And I'm not talking about from a technical point of view. I mean in terms of his mentality. So him coming out and clapping back at all these people is a good sign. In fact, I'd be more worried if he didn't clap back. Because he's been getting a hell of a lot of provocation from Tyson Fury over the years, from Lennox Lewis to some extent, and certainly now from Andy Ruiz over the past few weeks or even couple months. Loads of provocation. Now he's finally clapping back. Shows that he's still human. Shows that he's not actually an android or a robot, but he does actually have some human being in him. Good to see that he's clapping back at these guys. And he's putting that fire into training for the rematch. Okay? Now, as far as him saying that Andy Ruiz caught him with a lucky punch, does this mean that he's not going to learn from the mistakes of the first fight? Possibly, but not necessarily. You see, the mind is a funny thing. Psychology plays a big part in boxing. And it's like in the movie The Matrix. Any of you seen The Matrix? Where the Oracle knows that Neo is the chosen one, that he's the one. But when Neo goes to see the Oracle tells him, you're not the one. Even though she knows he is. She tells him what he needs to hear in that moment in order to be the best version of himself, in order to fulfill his destiny. She tells him what he needs to hear. She doesn't tell him the truth. She tells him what he needs to hear. Now, the same can apply sometimes to boxing. Is sometimes, yeah, you need to tell yourself the truth, or you need to tell a fighter the truth. But other times, you will need to lie to them. Or sometimes you will need, to some extent, maybe not to lie to yourself, but to focus on the positives rather than dwelling on the negatives. Because if Anthony Joshua at this point was to take on all the criticisms about his style and implement every single improvement that people think he needs to make, he may be overwhelmed by that going into the Ruiz fight. It may actually make him lose confidence because he'll think, hang on, I need to basically become a completely different fighter to beat Andy Ruiz. You know, that really could be damaging to him psychologically. Whereas in his mindset, he's probably thinking, I don't need to change loads. I need to change a few little small things, you know, not make a couple little mistakes, and then I'm good. I don't need to go overboard and change the whole makeup of myself as a fighter just to beat Ruiz. I nearly beat him first time. That's probably how AJ's thinking. And sometimes that works. And I'll give you some examples. Ironically, a guy who's coming out criticizing AJ and, you know, the things he needs to change. Lennox Lewis. I remember this at the time. When he lost to Oliver McCall, he kept saying over and over again, McCall caught him with a lucky punch. That's all Lewis was saying. It was a lucky punch. And we all know it wasn't a lucky punch, or we should all know that. It wasn't. That was a punch that McCall had been working on in training for months, or certainly for several weeks, with his trainer, Manny Stewart, and sparring with Tony Tucker at the time. He'd been working on throwing a straight right hand down the pipe and beating Lewis to the punch because Manny Stewart, his trainer, had noticed that Lewis would telegraph his right hand and loop it rather than throwing it straight. So that was a technical thing that rehearsed over and over and over again. He pulled it off in the fight. It was no lucky punch. But Lewis told himself it was a lucky punch because that's his way of rebuilding his confidence. Do you understand? That's his way of telling himself, I'm still the man. You know, I'm not this hype job, garbage fighter that the American press are trying to make me out to be. No, I'm still the man. Now, Lewis didn't ignore, any technical limitations that he may have had because Manny Stewart didn't allow him to ignore those technical limitations because he hired Stewart as his trainer right after McCall beat him. So Stewart jumped ship from the McCall camp to the Lewis camp. Manny Stewart made him aware of all his deficiencies, and that's why Lewis hired him. Because Lewis said, who better to train me than the guy who masterminded my first defeat? Brought him on board, and, the rest is history. But even when Lewis lost to Hasim Rahman, and just to show you here, where is it? Yeah, here. It says, Lewis called McCall's victory lucky and offered $10 million for a rematch. And indeed, he did. He kept saying it over and over again. McCall was lucky. It was a lucky punch, this, that, and the other. They eventually rematched, obviously, and Lewis won. And he fought a very different fight in the rematch than he did in the first fight. Far more technically sound in the rematch than the first fight was. But the same thing in the Hasim Rahman fight. He kept saying Hasim Rahman got lucky. He landed a lucky punch. Okay? And you can see it here. Where are we at? Yeah, this is quoting from Lennox Lewis after the Hasim Rahman rematch. He said, here I did what I had to do. I told everybody that his punch in South Africa was lucky. So again, people going overboard about AJ saying that Ruiz caught him with a lucky punch. Lewis said the same thing about Rahman. He said the same thing about McCall, but he still beat both guys in the rematches. He still made adjustments despite the fact that he called their punches lucky punches. Sometimes it's just a way of a fighter maintaining his confidence level. In his own mind, he doesn't want to believe the other guy is better than him. So he's going to come up with these excuses, he's a lucky punch. That doesn't mean he's not going to make technical adjustments. That doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to make technical improvements just because he's saying they caught him with a lucky shot. And a more recent example would be Kovalev when he lost to Alida Alvarez. He said Alvarez got lucky. He landed a lucky shot. He was winning the fight. That's what Kovalev said. And in fact, I was a little concerned about Kovalev saying this, okay, going into the Alida Alvarez rematch. He said, I was doing just fine. I was winning the fight, and then he caught me with a lucky shot in whatever round it was 7th round, 6th round. He said he caught me with a lucky shot. It wasn't a lucky shot. Anybody who was paying attention will know that Alvarez was landing a lot of good punches, and Kovalev was tiring prior to getting dropped by that right hand. Yeah, in the rounds preceding that. But again, in Kovalev's mind, he needs to keep himself elevated above Alvarez as a fighter. He needs to believe in his mind, I'm a better fighter than him. I don't need to change everything about myself to beat this guy. make a few little adjustments, I'll beat him no problem. This is what Kovalev told himself in his own mind. And he was right. I thought the Alvarez performance was a fantastic performance by Sergey Kovalev. So again, the psychological approach that different fighters have, will vary. But whatever works at the end of the day. You have to find out what works for you. As far as Anthony Joshua, we'll find out, I guess, if the rematch takes place, whether he's, taken on board the fact that he needs to make technical adjustments. One of the things I am a little concerned about, though, is him saying that he didn't go into the first fight planning to fight with his left hand low. As I've said in my analysis video, which I uploaded on Daily Motion, where I analyzed the fight on screen, I think AJ keeping his left hand low was a good thing at long range. I think Ruiz doesn't like when a tall guy like that has got his left hand low. Like AJ was, because Ruiz is not dangerous at long range. He's dangerous at mid-range and close range. But at long range, if your left hand is low, you don't know what the left hand is. It makes him hesitant. When you got both hands up, he can see where your hands are. That left hand is not out there as an antenna, as a measuring stick, keeping Ruiz away. He's more likely to attack you if you got both hands up. This is something that AJ seems to be missing and doesn't seem to understand. And in fact, Lennox Lewis, in a recent video, said, maybe I'll leave a link to it actually in the description below. Shout out to Devon Sinclair. He put me onto this video where Lewis is saying the exact same thing I've been saying about keeping your left hand low, about AJ keeping his left hand low against Ruiz, and that it's actually beneficial to keep your left hand low against certain shorter fighters, particularly guys with slow feet. They're less likely to attack you if your left hand's low because they don't know where it is, and the jab is coming up from outside of their field of vision. And they have to split their attention between watching your left hand down there and watching your right hand, which is up by your chin. Whereas if you've got both hands up, they can see where your hands are at all time. They're more likely to attack you. Certainly, I think that's the case with Andy Ruiz. And in the AJ Ruiz first fight, AJ wasn't getting into trouble when he was at long range with his left hand low. That's not where he was getting into trouble. He was getting into trouble when he tried to exchange with Ruiz at close range and mid range. That's where he was getting in trouble, not at long range when he was moving around with his left hand down. He didn't get into trouble in that posture at all. Ruiz didn't have the foot speed to take advantage of that, or the straight right hand over the top at long range to take advantage of that. Yeah. So that is one area for me of technical concern where I think AJ maybe hasn't understood that keeping your left hand low can actually be a good thing. It can actually discourage certain opponents from throwing punches. And that isn't what went wrong in the first fight. Every knockdown in the Ruiz fight for AJ, the knockdowns he suffered, came at mid-range and close range when he was trying to exchange. Not long range with his left hand down, getting clipped over the top with right hands. No. You look at the times when Ruiz tried to throw right hands over the top at long range against AJ. They were rubbish. They were falling short. They were not good shots. He doesn't do that well, Andy Ruiz. So that area, I'm still a little concerned that AJ hasn't learned a lesson there and could be putting himself in more danger by not learning that lesson for the rematch. He just thinks, I guess because McCracken's telling him, keep your hands up, because that's all McCracken told him in the corner, or one of the things McCracken told him in the corner during the first fight, is just keep your hands up, keep your hands up. But will he exchange the way he exchanged in the last fight? Has he learned that lesson, not exchanging? You certainly would hope so. You certainly would hope so, but he didn't learn the lesson during the fight, which was very curious to me. He got himself in trouble in the third round by exchanging, and then all the other knockdowns, he got himself in trouble by exchanging. In fact, no, the second knockdown in the third round, I don't think he got into trouble there from exchanging. He was still hurt. That's where he ended up getting knocked down. But the two knockdowns later on in the fight, he was trying to exchange, gets himself clipped. Why would you try and exchange after that's how you got yourself in trouble in the first place? That did baffle me. Maybe it's because he was out of it and totally concussed. I don't know. But it was troubling that he didn't actually make adjustments during the fight. He kept going back and making the same mistake over and over again, exchanging with a shorter guy who has the better chin and the faster hands, who's better up close. Like, don't do it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe AJ was tired and didn't think he could go the distance and felt like he had to gamble to take Ruiz out. Maybe he wanted one of them, spectacular knockouts in a wild fight. I don't know what it was, but he kept making the same mistake over and over again. But as I say, in the rematch, just because he says that Ruiz landed a lucky punch, it doesn't mean he's not going to make adjustments. Yeah, necessarily. He may not, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, because as I've pointed out, Kovalev said something similar about Alvarez. Lennox Lewis said something similar about McCall and Hasim Ratman. And he made it, in all those situations, Lewis made adjustments in both fights, in both rematches, and Kovalev made adjustments against Alvarez in the rematch. Despite just calling it, a fluke, a lucky punch. So anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.